What sets high performers apart from those who are just doing enough to get by? It is mindset. And how do you find or develop that mindset? Well, that's what we talk about today on the Hard Thing podcast. Welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Justin Lewis, and this is the show designed to help you improve your life, specifically by doing hard things. Today, I have the awesome opportunity to talk with Marty Strong, who is a former Navy SEAL, also the author of the book, Be Nimble, which is coming out pretty soon here. So I'm excited to give you my conversation with Marty Strong. Listen up while we talk about doing hard things and overcoming average. All right. Well, thank you for coming on the Hard Thing podcast, Marty. I'm excited to have you here and have you talk with us and have this conversation with you.
Thanks for having me, Justin.
Of course. Well, I like to jump in with the question that I ask every single guest, and hopefully I prepared you enough. But Marty, what's the hardest thing you've ever done?
The hardest thing I've ever done was bury my oldest son, Michael, who died. He's in Arlington National Cemetery.
I'm so sorry. Usually I ask that question and I kind of expect other responses. In your case, I was kind of expecting buds or going to combat.
Well, you asked for the hardest, so that was the hardest. There's a lot of other hard ones after that, but yeah, that was the hardest.
And I have to say, I can't imagine the difficulty in having to do something like that. Because, in some way, shape, or form, I think we all kind of prepare ourselves for the death of our parents, or at least, we hope we do.
Sure.
But I'm guessing for our children, that's something you never expect.
Yeah, not in the he died in a car accident in an ice storm here in the United States after a tour in Iraq. So I was prepared for him to die in Iraq. I mean, I was in uniform. I understand that's the risk you take. He volunteered to go in the service, and he volunteered to go to Iraq. We talked at length before he actually went in and volunteered, and he came out of Iraq without a scratch. And then he ends up dying in an ice storm in a big car accident at 9:00 in the morning on a Wednesday. So I wasn't prepared for that, and not that particular way.
Yeah. I know death is a very touchy subject, and if we need to move on at all, please let me know. In your book, it talks about, or at least from what I understand, your book deals with coping, at least with changing information, changing tasks, things like that, being able to kind of keep up with what's coming down the pipe. And though it's kind of a different avenue, I'd say, what were some of the ways that you coped with the death of your son? And I'm asking to hopefully help someone out there who has the death of a loved one on the horizon and doesn't know it yet.
Sure. Well, I've met a lot of people that have lost loved ones, and I'd lost a lot of friends before this particular event with my son in the SEAL teams, and one or two friends of mine in high school from accidents. So, the concept of death and the process of grieving and all that wasn't new to me. And I'm talking about maybe 15 or 16 people before my son died. So I'd also had an experience loading, SEALs that were KIA and SEALs that were severely wounded on helicopters and on a mission. So, those are all traumatic events, and it doesn't inoculate you. It doesn't make you numb to the emotions that were associated with the next death, regardless of where it comes from. It gives you a chance to exercise your thoughts about death and also about life. And you start to get the feeling that it's either random or it's brought upon the person that died by events that they participated in, choices they made that led them, kind of like a Final Destination movie thing. Mm-hmm. Or there's something else. And I don't have a really strict religious or philosophical view along religious lines about any of that. But I do believe that all those earlier experiences prepared me for the suddenness of death and, the phone call type of thing. And we got the phone call, and that's about as sudden as it can get. Right. And then I had a lot of time to think about it immediately afterwards. In my case, which I think happens with most parents, somebody, the mother or the father, somebody has to kind of stand up and hold everything together for a while, because there's a lot of things you got to do, a lot of processes. And so if you are that person that's the strong kind of manager of the grief and the emotions and all the administrative logistics and all the things that are happening, they're all very serious and have to be done. You should, one, give yourself, a break and not beat yourself up, because there'll be a time. Get done what you need to get done. This could be the mother, the father, it could be a grandfather figure, it could be anybody. Oh, an older brother sometimes steps in and does this, but usually somebody steps in and they get it all done. And then they feel guilty afterwards because they didn't go through all the open grieving when everybody else did, and almost maybe even appeared cold because they have to compartmentalize to be able to perform. And that's okay. So if anybody goes through this process, and everybody's going to go through this process at one point, that's okay. There are responsibilities, there are decisions to be made. And if you're that person, go ahead and do all the things you have to do, and just set aside the fact that your time of grieving is going to happen, in a couple of weeks or a month. And then the second thing is allow yourself that time. Allow yourself to sit back and think about all of it. Get yourself off the hook of being the family project manager, the family legal person, the family financial advisor, all the things that go along with a death, and let yourself just be a human being and just react to it. And the third thing is you're never going to stop thinking about it. And I've talked to people that are in their 80s and 90s, and they have lost children in different ways 60 years ago. They never stop. Not a day goes by they don't think about it. But you can decide whether you want to think about it as a completely negative experience, or whether you can dwell on that, or you can think about and dwell on all the positive things in that person's life, and how that life interacted with you and other people. So I'll give you an example of that in practice. My wife and I, we don't celebrate or identify or mark the anniversary of our son Michael's death. What we do is we have a celebration and a ceremony we put together on his birthday. And it's kind of a Viking thing. We have a bottle of vodka that he liked. That was actually when he was visiting us for Thanksgiving before he passed. And it's the same bottle. And we pour a shot out of his bottle. My wife pours some Jamesons in a shot glass. I pour some tequila in a shot glass. And then we have usually a cupcake or a small cake with one candle in it. We take a birthday card and we write a message to him. And then we take a picture of all that. And then we do a toast to him outside. And then we set the birthday card on fire so the message can float up with the smoke. The problem is, in the first 3 or 4 years, we found out that you can't burn a laminated birthday card. So it's been about 16 years now. So we're really good at that whole exercise. We find you have to find a paper one, or even make one. That's even better. You have to dump gasoline on it. I mean, otherwise, especially if it's cold out, which it usually is in February, otherwise the ceremony gets tainted with your pain in the cold. So we do that every year on the birthday, and then we think about all the great things. We look at pictures, we think about all the good things and the great things and the great experiences. And you can't help but once in a while dwell on something. I have 5 kids, so they're all grown, and I see my grandkids, and I think, what would have been, what if his kids have been like? But those are the kinds of things I think would be helpful. One, don't beat up yourself. Give yourself time to grieve once the process of the logistics and everything is done. 2, kind of grips with the positive of the person rather than the negative of the event. Don't let the event drive you. And 3, you're never going to forget. It's always going to be there. So it might as well be a positive thought. And then 4, if you're going to mark the occasion, try to make it a happy event.
Love that. I have to, well, comes to mind I think it's a maybe Navajo, but it's definitely a Native American saying that something like live so that, you know, when you were born, you cried and the world rejoiced. Live so that when you die, uh, the world cries and you rejoice, or something like that. Basically, live in such a way that
Yeah.
you're remembered. And also, growing up, my family, or maybe my dad, and we all kind of took the example of him. He grew up in the John Wayne era, a man's man and whatnot, and he never liked to celebrate his own birthday. So all of us kids, we kind of took that upon ourselves. And then I met my wife, and she is all about celebrating birthdays. And I have to say, thinking about that and then hearing your experiences of celebrating the life of your son, I think maybe we don't celebrate life enough, especially our own or other people's. Maybe we don't spend enough time just happy to be here. And hopefully that makes up for all of the sad, depressing that I brought up with talking about death and whatnot.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's always better to see the world as an optimistic, glass overflowing kind of point of view. There's enough negative out there. It'll come along, you got to deal with it. But I've just decided to live that way, and and it helps.
And actually, that kind of brings up another question that I wanted to ask. So, in the military, obviously, and the closer to combat you get, the more negative things you're probably going to see. And in situations like that, I can imagine it's really easy to develop a mindset that you get the job done, but in your off hours you can develop a mindset that can somewhat be torturous, can somewhat lead to a negative worldview. So what sort of things did you do, or maybe you saw some of your colleagues do, to kind of keep yourself above that negative miasma, if that makes sense?
Well, I know what you described is in common culture, movies, TV shows, etc. And I've never been in conventional forces. I've only been in special operations.
Mhm.
They're pre-selected for a certain mindset, and they have high IQs. You can't get through any of the selection programs for the Green Berets, SEALs, Air Force Special Ops, and the same thing overseas. British SAS, the French Commando Hubert. I mean, we worked with all these guys. Unless you have a sense of humor and you're able to let things kind of roll off your back a little bit, otherwise you'd never make it, because the training after you're selected and you actually get, to wear the pin and be the cool guy, the training after that is basically stress testing you. It's putting you into situations and in conditions and in scenarios that are difficult, if not impossible, at first glance. It's kind of like a Rubik's Cube, and you don't know the answer. You don't know how to fix it. You don't know how to make it work, but you've been selected for those other attributes I mentioned to figure out a way to make it work. So those kinds of people in special operations have a different mindset in a combat environment. First off, most of the guys that I've ever worked with and the guys I've met since I've been out of the military, they're in special ops, see it as a noble cause. Combat, when we go in, is for something important. We aren't taking a hill. We aren't just holding a piece of ground. We're going in to capture or kill Osama bin Laden. We're going in to rescue Americans in the middle of Africa that are being held hostage by bad guys. Doing the same thing in the Philippines or anywhere else around the world. We're seizing ships. We're killing Somali pirates that are holding hostages. That's the kind of thing that we know is going to be on the mission list. So when we get the call and we go, even if we're in a sustained combat environment, like say Afghanistan or Iraq was for many years, they don't call us up and say, hey, we want you to just go down and do something normal. So that means that the mindset that you have is about performance. It's not the negative kind of movie combat environment. It's about performance. And why you focus on performance is because the people you're surrounded with are obsessed with performance. That means your peers. The other people you're working with in special operations and SEAL teams, they're trained like you. They have most of the same training opportunities as you, but it's highly competitive internally because none of us want to let each other down. So there's never a day that goes by where we're trying to learn something new so that we have more contribution to the team, or learning something that we know better so that we make a better contribution to the team. So when we're actually told to go do something, we're focused on our stepping up and our performing and contributing as best we can so that we're not letting anybody else down. And that's universal among all the people on the mission. If you execute the mission can be successful and you come back, and you may still, most of our guys would still be critiquing in their minds what they could have done better, how they could have decided to do this, what choice, what judgment they made. We have general military critiques after every mission, training or otherwise, to point out how we can be better as a group. But individually, every one of those people, the second they got on the helicopter or got on the boat or got on the submarine heading home or to a safe place, they're running that through their head. And like an NFL football player, they're wondering, why didn't I jink left instead of jink right? And then I got tackled. Or why did I not catch the ball with my hands instead of my shoulder? And that's just a professional. So it's a completely professional, performance-driven mindset. Now, when you lose somebody in the team, everybody feels like they failed. That's the number one thought. We failed somehow. We failed that person. And so you have a guilt, but it's a guilt about you did something to let that person, be hit and hurt, and maybe didn't keep them alive after they were hit and hurt. And maybe you weren't even the person that could have kept them alive. It's just the way that's the initial reaction. So that's even a deeper introspective search on what you should have done different or better. But then the next day, you're in the briefing room and there's another one coming up. So you can't dwell on that and let it inhibit and impact your thoughts and your performance, because that's still job number one. You don't want to be that loose cannon or that person that's one step too slow on this mission because you're feeling sorry for the yourself or the team or whatever, and then it happens again because you did something to cause the next one. So yeah, and you put it away, you compartmentalize it until you come home, and then once you come home, especially if there's a regular rotation, you have guilt that you're not back there contributing. And that's just, that's special operations. That's the way they think about it. That's why they went, in Afghanistan, most guys in the SEAL teams had 2 to 3 times more combat tours than the SEALs that went to Vietnam had, because they wanted to be back there. They wanted to be in the fight. They wanted to do good things and be a part of the cause.
A couple of things really stand out to me. I'd say the first thing is the noble cause. Kind of this idea, this deep belief that there's something more important and greater than oneself, which is incredibly admirable. And it actually makes me think of the song America the Beautiful. I think it's in the 3rd verse where it says something like and country more than self-loved, or something, talking about men in 1776 who loved the country more than themselves, and how I think that's mirrored today in a lot of the servicemen and women. You're not in the military now, you deal more in business. Have you seen that, not necessarily that same mindset, but have you seen something akin to that, or really figured out a way to help people generate kind of that idea in another organizational setting? Not necessarily just like the mission first, but kind of this idea that we're in a noble cause together, if that makes sense.
The short answer is yes, but a lot of the same characteristics apply. So the selection for law enforcement, the selection for firefighting, the selection for emergency medical technicians, the selection for ER nurses and doctors, those people are, even if they don't put their bodies at risk every day, say in the emergency room, their performance is life and death outcomes. Mm-hmm. And all 3 of those categories I just mentioned. So they rely on each other. They rely on themselves and their own proficiency and their own performance, and they rely on each other. Very rarely do you find, a firefighting unit that just slacks off and doesn't really care if that guy over there can't pick another firefighter up and carry him out of a burning building. They're all working out. They're all giving each other a bunch of crap, right? The same thing in the SEAL teams. Everybody's like, I tell you, when I started out as an enlisted SEAL for 10 years, went to officers candidate school, and I was an officer for the second 10. You get to around 30, 31, the corollary would say the NFL's spot on. You've got 22 and 23-year-old studs that are zipping by you. You're wearing 75 or 80 pounds of combat gear, running an obstacle course or doing something, and they're like, woo! And maybe they'll look back and go, morning, sir. There's no excuse.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to send 10 people, you have 10 people. You need all 10 people to be able to do the same 10 things, the same exact standard, right? That's the way it is in firefighting. That's the way it is in some of the elite police units. So for those kinds of scenarios, yes. And it's because the outcome is deadly serious. It's very, very critical that those people perform, and they don't tolerate anybody that doesn't. So they select people that they think will do it, and then they train them. And if they don't, they let them go. And if they can, they're part of the team. They tend to stay committed for a long time. In the general commercial population, I've seen it mostly in entrepreneurs, mostly in people that have the chutzpah to start up a company, because essentially that's a risk taker who's somehow come to grips with the possibility of failure and has decided that that's something that's worth risking. Sometimes they have failed before. I've met a lot of people that have had 2 or 3 businesses that went under before they were successful. That's kind of hardened them to their sense of purpose, their sense of mission. And then, then there's those that started one business that didn't do well, and they just went and got a job and said, that's just too tough. So I don't think it's a requirement. I wouldn't consider it a standard I look for out here in the regular world, with regular technical experts and employees. Now with leaders, because of my pedigree, I expect my leaders to care about the bigger picture, care about the mission, and care about the people that they're leading. That's not necessarily taught. It's not taught in school. It's not taught in college. It's usually not taught as a cultural requirement and standard in most companies. So when you're interviewing, you have a chance, just like in the SEAL teams or in a firefighting unit, to try to screen for those characteristics, behaviors, attributes up front. And hopefully you have enough sense of the person that when they come in, it doesn't turn into a train wreck and you have to let them go because they're beating up on everybody. And yeah.
Now, sorry, my arm slipped there. Obviously this podcast, it's not meant for corporations. It's meant for individuals. So I guess the next obvious question is, and this is kind of a doozy, how can one person who maybe doesn't know if they're at that level to, pass the selection or whatnot, what are some things that they can do to get to that point, specifically with the mindset that you were talking about? Because I feel like that would be more applicable to whatever anyone might be doing, right?
Sure. Well, are you familiar with the book, What Color Is Your Parachute? You ever heard of that?
I haven't.
It's been around for about 4 decades. It's a self-inventory tool. And what it is designed for somebody who doesn't know what they want to do or isn't sure what they're doing is the right thing for them, to read through, go through a whole series of introspective exercises, kind of a discovery. And I think the final, goal of the book is the old adage, if you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work. Or if you can figure out how to get paid for what you love to do, that's like the perfect job. And I think in answer to your question, a book like that is the first place to go to make sure what you think you want to be is the right thing to be. Obviously, there's a lot of cliche examples of teenagers being driven into academic profiles to become doctors or lawyers or engineers or do what their parents did or take over the family business, whatever. And there's a huge statistical, statistically, like 60% of those driven kids walk away from those professions either right after graduation or before they even finish the process, because it wasn't theirs. They didn't own it. It was never theirs. It was somebody else's imprinted goal and set of expectations for their happiness. So first thing you got to do is you really have to do a little bit of soul searching, and you have to look at all the different things you can do in life, because being a leader is only one little thing in the entire spectrum of what you could do. Being an artist, you don't have to be a leader. Being a musician, you don't have to be a leader. If you want to be a personal coach for fitness and all that, there's some motivational aspects to that, but it doesn't mean that you have to hire and fire people. So, and I have enough examples in my past watching people that thought they needed to aspire, like the classics. You have a top salesperson, they think they should be the sales manager. All of a sudden they're the sales manager. They're the worst sales manager, but they were the best salesperson because they were happy, but they thought they were supposed to go to that next level. Or somebody in management said, you should do this. And you basically killed the golden goose by doing that. They were unhappy, and maybe not, that wasn't their talent. So you need to spend some time doing that. It's kind of like measure twice, cut once, before you throw yourself into some disciplined regimen of study and mental preparation, and kind of go into a warrior pattern where you're going to wake up every morning and you're going to, whatever it is you want to do, you're going to, study it, and practice it and be good at it. So that's the first thing I'd say. Make sure you know that you've given yourself enough time to discover what it is you want to do. And I'll caveat that with, I've had several professions. I'm 63 years old and I'm still rocking and rolling. I'm going to probably work the next 15 years easy. I have good DNA, so I tend not to look 63, and I don't move around like I'm 63, but I am. And that means that I've gone through several types of professions, including the SEAL teams. And it's giving me a perspective that if you come out and you want to be a salesperson, be a salesperson for 10 years. If at the end of that, you don't feel like that's really what, makes you happy, and you want to be an artist, or you want to, be a carpenter, or you want to open up a restaurant, do that for 10 years. That's only 20 years. You're 40 years now, 40 years old if you came out of high school, or you're 44 if you came out of college. I've done speeches. I did one with some Naval Academy graduates, alumni. And the point of the speech was talking about what do you do when you get out of the uniform, when you retire or leave, and the mindset you should have, and how do you get a job and all that. And I did more of kind of a tough love, scared straight approach. I said, first off, you're not going to have the job you have now. You're not going to be the captain of a ship, or you're not going to be a fighter pilot. They don't have that out there. So set your expectations differently. Hang your uniform up, put your medal someplace where, your friends and family can see that and say that was a really fantastic career. And then put your apprentice hat on and go in with your eyes open and your ears open and your mouth shut, and become a student at the apprentice level until you understand whatever it is you want to go into. Once you get a good handle on whatever line of work you want to go into, all that other experience, all that leadership, communication skills, the judgment and wisdom of all those years will kick in, but it'll matter because you know the business, or the functional, operational activity as a practitioner. And what a lot of guys will do is they'll come in and they'll think, well, if I was a Navy commander, or I was an Air Force colonel, or that's where I'm going to come in there, or a little bit higher. No, it's a different profession. It's a different career. Start from scratch. Because that's not how you started the Air Force. You started the Air Force as a nug that knew nothing. So that's a psychological thing. So if anybody listening to this isn't at the beginning of their life, a professional life, that's the same kind of threshold. If you decided that you're not happy where you are, don't expect that you're just going to transfer over and your pay, your salary, your security, or feeling of security is going to be, relevant. It's not. You're going to be at risk. You're going to be the new guy. I think the first command I got when I joined SEAL Team 2, I was 18 years old, was go empty the trash can. Right? I just graduated SEAL training. I went through Army jump school. I have Army jump wings. I walk into SEAL Team 2 and I'm told, go empty the trash can. And the guy that told me to go empty the trash can was a guy named Mike Thornton, who was a Medal of Honor winner in Vietnam. And he about 6'3", and I was about 125, 130 pounds soaking wet. I went from being somebody to nobody in about 30 seconds walking into that room. And I knew what my function was for a while, emptying the trash can. Everybody's got to go through it.
I love that. I think maybe that's a cycle we should all get used to, is that, you know, even in different parts of the day, you're somebody and you're nobody. My friend, he's a real estate agent, and have you heard of Top Golf?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he bought you know, for business purposes, he bought a membership there, kind of one of the higher ones. That way he could take not only friends when he wants to, but also clients and things like that. And he has various businesses that he runs. And he told us once he went, and he's younger than me. He's like 23, 24. And he and his wife don't always dress in classic real estate agent clothing. You know, sometimes they wear hoodies and things like that, just like normal people. And they go to this Top Golf, and at first the attendant or whatever was kind of treating them like, who are you? Like, whatever. And then he's like, wait, we're platinum members. And then totally flipped the script. And the attendant was like, oh yeah, anything you need, we'll get it for, and super kind of servile to him. And again, that's just a good example of, we shouldn't get too attached to being the top guy or the bottom guy, because things can change just like that. Especially with how crazy, you know, life has been with COVID and whatnot. You know, things can, you know, you could be let go from your job like that just because there's no money. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I talk a lot about it in the book, Be Nimble. You know, obviously COVID's a major disruptive event. It's a black swan event, kind of a classic, a little less sudden, but kind of on the par of a 9/11 or a Pearl Harbor attack, you know, it changes everything everywhere. And what they teach you in prisoner of war school in the military, and all the fighter pilots from the different services and the special forces guys, they have to go through a school where they tell you all about the history of survival in prisoner of war camps all the way back to Civil War. And then they teach you coping mechanisms and explain how you're going to adapt and all that. And then you go into the actual environment, you change your clothes, you go in and you're a prisoner for a while. And then they let you escape, and then they bring you back in because you can't escape. So, because they control the whole environment around the prison camp. But the rule that they teach, and Viktor Frankl in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, about his experience in a Nazi prison camp. And he happened to be a psychiatrist, so he had a pretty good professional, you know, backing to his thoughts and his opinions. He aligned with the same thing. He said, and they said in prisoner war school, that the people that had the hardest time adapting as prisoners were the ones that couldn't let go of their past identity. And the identity, it wasn't who they were as a person, but who they thought they were, with all the trappings, the wealth, the status, you know, what society thought they were, not whether they were a good person or a bad person. So he'd see bankers, you know, well-to-do bankers and successful politicians and successful entertainers that were well-known names just curl up in a ball in the fetal position and die in the German camps. So the takeaway in the prisoner of war school was, and, you know, this is consistent with the feedback from prisoners all through, you know, almost 100 years plus of experience, that if you walk in there and you still think you're, you know, a squadron commander, you still think you're, you know, a rich person, whatever it is that you think you are, the longer you hold on to that, the worse it's going to be for you. Because what you're supposed to do as a survival technique, when something catastrophic happens like this, or so dramatic as a change, is getting fired, a lot of other dramatic changes, you're supposed to clear your mind of all of that, look around you, and start to absorb the new reality and become a student of the new reality. So now we're back to that eyes open, ears open, mouth shut. What do the guards do? What's their routines? When do you get fed? What do you get punished for? You know, what are the parameters and the rules of movement around the camp? How can I keep myself healthy? How can I keep myself, you know, fed? How can I keep myself warm? How can I help everybody around me? How can they help me? How can we communicate without getting caught? Those are all the new rules, new reality. The ones that grab hold of that soon survive. And the ones that don't. And Bud's training's got the same kind of background. There are people that we've had professional football players. We've had Ironman Hawaiian triathlete, top 5 finishers quit. It's like, really? You did the Hawaiian, the Ironman triathlon and you're quitting in a 1.5 mile bay swim because you think it's too cold. I mean, true story. So they just didn't let go. They saw themselves as, I'm a hero. I'm a superstar. I'm an ex-professional football player going through buds instead of I'm just meat going through a selection process. And the sooner I figure this stuff out and fall and become good at surviving and then thriving in this new environment, the better it's going to be.
Yeah. Again, that reminds me of another quote. Obviously, I could quote Charles Darwin. That's pretty obvious. But there was a quote that is like, the meaning of life is to be at any moment willing to sacrifice everything you are for everything you could be, or something like that. And in that sort of way, every single day, we're kind of reshaping our identity because things change every day. And that's really fascinating. I love how you said become a student of the new reality, because again, and it's exemplified by the questions you were asking. When you develop that curious mindset, you're not emotionally involved with survival or thrival or whatever. Instead, you're just asking and learning and kind of gamifying your situation, which I think is a very powerful way to overcome any situation, because everyone likes to feel like they're winning. And when you feel like you're actually playing a game, it might be easier to feel like you're winning, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's not a bad way to look at it. It's a new set of rules, a new framework. And if you can keep a sense of humor, which is also kind of critical to survival in almost any situation, you can kind of make a game out of it.
Yeah. I want to ask now, you've had, like you said, a couple careers. When you did start into the business world, what sort of things did you do? Kind of what was that transition like?
So I wanted to be a lawyer, and a friend of mine talked me out of it after I took the LSAT because he was in investment advisory work, mostly in initial public offering stuff in Brazil, U.S. company, but Brazil operations. He spoke Portuguese. He was a SEAL officer, and that was good for him. But the person that owned that company had a son that I put through SEAL training when I was an instructor, and my friend said, well, he'll hire you, without even an interview, and then we'll just figure out what to do with you. And then I decided not to go there because I didn't speak Portuguese. I didn't have a lot of the skill sets that they were looking for. And I went with another financial services firm where I could kind of grow my own business domestically this was up in Maryland. And I did that for a couple of years and then moved on from that firm to do managed money and become a portfolio manager with United Bank of Switzerland, with UBS. And same type of work in that I was working with clients. First, I had to find clients. I had to convince them to give me their life savings, and then I had to grow their investment wealth and continue to grow my business and manage my business. I ended up having 3 employees working for me, but it wasn't a big business, and I didn't have to worry about working with a lot of peers and kind of like your standard corporate interaction. None of that was going on. It was very entrepreneurial, no salary, 100% fees and commissions. I got a salary for about 3 or 4 months to pass all my tests that were required for me to do what I was doing, and then 0. So it was basically, you talk about Darwin. We had 41 people in the initial class when I started. All of them were successful. They were selected for that. Actually, they were selected. We had like 7 or 8 interviews and competency tests and aptitude tests. And I think I don't even know if any of them are left in the business anymore, but when I left, it's 70 years, even though I was with another company, I think there were 4 people left in that original 41. And most of them left in the first year when they went from, a stipend, training stipend for a couple of months to 0. And if you don't sell, if you don't find a new client, you die. Mm-hmm. And maybe along the lines that we just talked about. And these are very successful people. All of a sudden they weren't successful if they weren't selling. So maybe they didn't like that paradigm and they left.
Yeah. It's really hard for most people, including I would say me. It's really hard for people in general to, go from eating, I guess, normal food and then realize, hey, we're going to be really tight for a few months. So I might need to scale back how much I eat out, or, how many trips we go on or whatnot, things like that.
Yeah. I just put a picture of somebody with 8-pack abs and then say, that's the goal now.
Nice.
Starvation has a purpose.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. That's awesome. So then what spurred or inspired you writing the book, Be Nimble?
So I've written 8 novels, and that was initially it was kind of a hobby and cathartic because it was fun to write. I write it between 5:15 and 6:15 in the morning every day, 7 days a week. Before the sun comes up, I've already got it out of my system. And I've always liked to write ever since I was a kid. And so all the proceeds of my novels, I donate to the SEAL Veterans Foundation. So it goes to PSD and traumatic brain injury, because I didn't need the money from the novels. And I didn't think there was going to be more than one. First, it was just a challenge. And then the first one did okay and people liked it. And they said, ready to do another one? You're going to do a sequel? Okay. So I ended up with 4 SEAL novels and 4 science fiction novels about time travel. And so writing was, it was like a discipline. It was like getting up and brushing your teeth. And I'd always thought that I wanted to write a business book about leadership in business. And so I help a lot of people. I talk to a lot of people. I coach a lot of people. I have a lot of direct reports. I'm a CEO. So I have executives that report to me. And then I have to perform leadership functions, and I have to report to a board and so on. So I had a pretty good 360 view of the leadership job. And I started to codify what I thought was important. And I almost called the book Be Humble, because I believe in intellectual humility as a starting point. It's kind of what we were talking about with the prisoner of war camp. You basically start out and say, I don't care what I was yesterday, good or bad.
Right.
I'm gonna wake up every morning, take 20 minutes, clear my mind of all that kind of baggage, so that I'm open-minded and ready to accept new information. And it's hard, which is hard to do, right? If yesterday, you got you didn't get the bonus you thought you were going to get, you're carrying that forward, right?
Mhm.
Psychologically, emotionally. If you did get a really big bonus a couple days ago, now you're the man or the woman, and you're walking around, strutting around. That's messing you up too. So you can't rest on your laurels. It doesn't matter what you did yesterday. It doesn't matter whether you did it bad or good. You clear your mind, intellectual humility, and that's the starting point. And the next thing was, by being an open-minded learner with intellectual humility, I found that you can absorb information from all kinds of sources without questioning or just constantly comparing it to what you think you know. And that allows you to be highly nimble and adaptable in the choices and judgments that you make. It's like taking the blinders off. Another way of looking at it metaphorically is, if, let's say 1984, if you went and had, I said, I want you to tell me, everything you know about a subject. And you went, if it existed, you went to the Encyclopedia Britannica from 1984 that your dad has on the shelves. And you looked up answers and you came back and you told me, this is what it is. Well, in 1984, that was it. That was the word. That was the truth. That was the best you could get. But it became stale probably before it was even printed. And bit by bit, over the years, decade by decade, 20%, 30%, 40%, 50% of that entire set of encyclopedias became moot or so wrong that they're irrelevant. Yet people treat going to college and having a job for X number of years the same way. They go back and retrieve like a book off the shelf. Well, I know how to deal with this. Well, I've seen this before. I know exactly what this is. I know what this is. This is good or this is bad. And they're just painting it with all this stuff from the past. And you can't be nimble. You can't be adaptable and agile as a leader or as a designer or as anybody that's got to, think out of the box and be creative. And creativity is what keeps you surviving and thriving and growing and evolving over time. You can't be adaptable if you're sitting there doing the same thing over and over again. It's the exact opposite of being adaptable. So in this world, especially with the way, COVID shocked everything, COVID just fractured what's been sitting around for a long time. Why couldn't we have been doing Zoom 15 years ago? We could have. We just didn't do it because everybody was just used to the way we were communicating. And I could go on a long list of that. So sometimes these disruptions are perceived as a big negative, but most of the time there's somebody out there seeing them as opportunities.
Yeah. Again, I was reading on your website, the word for opportunity in Chinese is the mixture of opportunity and crisis. So, whenever there's some sort of crisis, like you say, there's an opportunity.
Yeah. So that I decided to codify all those things I just said, and a lot more about the mechanics of being a leader, talent selection, grooming, mentoring, training, coaching talent, and putting together teams when it made sense and not putting together teams when it didn't make sense. How to incent and inspire and influence behaviors in a positive way, how to create a culture that's positive and leaning forward and adaptable. And there's a lot of things in there like that. So, that was the genesis, and I finished the book and got a publisher, and it's coming out January 1st. And the publisher was nice enough to publish my second book, Be Visionary, which just got through copy editing. So it's going to come out at the end of the summer next year.
Awesome. Already a second book coming out. That's excellent news.
Yeah, I'm like, come on. The timing is goofy because you spend 200 days or 150 days writing it, and another 150 days getting it edited and looked at and everything, and then they sit on it for 6 months
for some reason
because they want to build buzz. So it looks like I'm writing a book like every 15 days or something, and it's not. It's just the timing's all messed up.
That's smart marketing, though.
Yeah, I guess.
Well, Marty, it's been awesome having you here on the show. I've enjoyed our conversation. How can people reach out to you, support you, get the book, and also see what you're up to?
Sure. Well, the easiest way is I have an author website. It's martystrongbenimble.com. martystrongbenimble.com. And there's links to my articles, obviously to Be Nimble, which is in pre-sale right now at Amazon's. So you can still buy it even if before January 1st, and it's in Kindle format too. I've got my podcast appearances, so there's a lot of information on there. And as Be Visionary, the second book starts to get lined up, we'll start to tee up when that's available for pre-sale. But that's the best place, martystrongbenimble.com.
Excellent. I'll put that up in the show notes. But like I said, now's the time for us to give our audience some action items. So based on our conversation, this is what I came up with. Number 1, celebrate life more often. Number 2, develop a better sense of humor. Number 3, get a really good idea of what you want to do. Was there anything you would like to add to that list?
Try to maintain a positive perspective on the world around you, which will help you with that sense of humor. Try to exercise the intellectual humility, the waking up every morning and don't take yourself too seriously from the day before, and look at the world as kind of a blank slate, walk into it. And the third thing that I think everybody would benefit from, it's not necessarily meditation, but especially with people that have stressful lives and leaders, take 20 minutes, usually early in the day, and try to not think about optimizing or executing tasks and to-do lists. Think about what you would like to see your world personally or your world professionally 2 years, 3 years, 5 years out. Because if you never look at the horizon and you never pick a place, a shining light to aim for, you basically just muddle along with somebody else's agenda kind of driving you moment to moment, day to day. And that's no way to live.
Yeah, agreed. Awesome. I will get those show notes. I will put those action items in the show notes, as well as how to reach out to you. But Marty, thank you so much for coming on the show and dealing with my scatterbrainedness. But it's been fun having you here and talking with you.
No, it's been a good interview. I like it. Thanks, Justin.
Thank you. Thank you guys for listening to another episode of the Hard Thing Podcast. I really appreciate you and all your support. Thank you for all the reviews, the times you shared the podcast. Thank you for helping us make this bigger and better and helping us get better guests on the show. I'd also like to invite you guys to go to OURrescue.org, get involved. They're a nonprofit organization that goes undercover to rescue kids from sex trafficking. They're an organization called Operation Underground Railroad, and they really are awesome and amazing. So go to OURrescue.org, get involved. Come back next week for another amazing, amazing episode. Thank you guys so much again for all your love and support. We'll see you. Keep doing hard things, and you will overcome average.